Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Dynamic Earth and to our Pop into the Ocean session. My name is Chris, and I'm joined here by Alycia Smith, who is a marine ecologist, and we are going to be talking to Alycia in a little moment about a lot of the work that she does. You might have prepared some activities to do in the classroom alongside us, so you may have something that looks a little bit like this prepared, and we're going to be looking at this in a moment after we chatted to Alycia. So if you have that ready, great. We haven't forgotten about it. We will do that shortly. But to get us started, Alycia, thank you for joining us today.
No worries.
And I'm sure everybody's wondering, what does a marine ecologist like yourself do?
A marine ecologist like myself? Well, so I specifically work in the deep ocean. So marine ecologists in general, they study the biological environment and its interactions with the environment around it. But as I am a deep sea ecologist, I look at animals that live in the ocean thousands of meters away from the surface.
Amazing. So do you look specifically at the abyss, or do you look at the midnight zone? Do you do a little bit of a mixture?
So most of my work has focused in the abyss, down here between 4,000 and 6,000 meters.
Excellent. So I actually have some pictures that you have very kindly sent through of some of your adventures when you have gone out and researched. Now, we will hopefully be able to see them in the studio up on the screen in front of us, and then we can have a little look at those photos and you can tell us a little bit about that work.
Of course.
I think our first photo, which we'll hopefully see up here soon, is of the ship itself. So can you tell us a little bit about what life is like on a big research ship?
Absolutely. So in order to collect the samples to do the work that we do, we have to travel quite far from land sometimes. And the work that we were completing for my studies was 1,000 miles away from the nearest land point. So it would take 4.5 days to sail away from land to go and get those samples. And then you're sending your equipment 4,000 meters down to the sea floor. So that's why you're probably looking at that picture and thinking that ship looks huge. And it is, because it takes a massive team of people to do this work.
Amazing. So if I click, then we may be able to see some of the big floats that you use on your ship. So what do you use those for?
So the floats are attached to a circular frame known as a lander. And you might have heard of the word lander when we speak about things such as space exploration and things on Mars. And it's exactly the same concept. So we use a seafloor lander to travel down to the seafloor and collect samples for us and carry out experiments and take photos so that we can study the environment as it exists. Because if you bring things up from that kind of depth, as you can imagine, the conditions changed and it's not very representative anymore.
Yes, so when we're talking about the conditions changing from the bottom of the ocean up to the surface, what kind of conditions are we talking about?
Well, there is certainly a change in temperature. The temperature in the study site I was looking at 4,000 meters was about 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is very cold. We also have a change in pressure. So as you can imagine, being down at 4,000 meters, there's quite a weight of all that water on yourself. So there's a high pressure down here and low at the surface. And there's also a big change in light levels.
Yes, so when you're all the way down, well, thousands of meters down into the sea, then you've got thousands of meters of water squashing you. So I guess when you bring stuff up to the top, then you don't have those thousands of meters of water squashing you, then everything's going to look a little bit weird and different.
Just a little.
Wonderful. So next up on our ship, we've got some of the work that's done in the lab as well. So do you spend a lot of time doing lab work when you're out in the ocean?
Absolutely. So working on a ship is very different to your normal 9-to-5 job. So you work 12-hour shifts every day, 7 days a week, so there's no weekends. And this can be for a trip up to 6-7 weeks in length. So it's a very long process, and we do spend a lot of time in the lab. So once that lander comes back from the seafloor, we bring it back on board and we take out water samples to look at chemistry, and we take out animals to look at the biology, and we also take out sediment and rocks to look at the geology.
Oh, amazing. Now, hopefully we'll be able to get some pictures up on a screen in here so we can see our next picture, but I think it is of your friend Marta.
Yes.
Now, there's a couple of pictures of Marta's work as well. So, did you have a lot of close friends on the ship if you're out for weeks and weeks at a time?
Yes, so I was very fortunate to go on the ship and do the research vessel journey with some close friends of mine who are also colleagues. And we were part of a large project that was looking at the environment from all different aspects. So I looked at the chemistry and the geology and some of the smaller animals that live down there, whereas Marta looked at the big fish that are known as scavengers.
Okay, so you are all there doing different research and learning about lots of different things.
Yes.
Yes, so I believe that one of the things that you looked at were these nodules, these metallic nodules that you get on the seabed. So if we come back to the studio, and then we'll be able to see some of these nodules a little bit more closely. And Alycia, can you tell us why they're so important? Because to me, they don't look that different from a lot of other rocks that I've maybe seen before.
Yes, this might look like the average stone that you see when you're just walking around at the beach or a park, but these rocks are known as polymetallic nodules, and they're a very special type of rock because they form over millions of years, and they contain a very high percentage of commercially important materials or elements that we need to make things such as batteries.
Oh, amazing.
So laying on the seafloor in the abyss is a vast resource in the form of a polymetallic nodule field that we can use to extract metals such as manganese, copper, cobalt, and these can be used to produce elements that make up a battery and use for energy storage.
Okay, so a lot of companies then are looking at these nodules, these unassuming nodules, realizing there's a lot of important stuff in them, and then investigating whether or not we can mine them and use them for stuff. So
yes.
Does that mean that your research involved how valuable these are and how we might protect them in future?
Yes, so we are essentially studying the environment around these nodules and in which they form so that we can better understand how it exists when it's not been disturbed, so that if the environment is disturbed in future, we can predict or mitigate and help that environment if it is impacted. So, for example, there are many species that live at this depth that call this a home. They either live on or in the small, tiny cracks in the rock, which was completely unknown to science a few years ago.
So those creatures, what do they look like? Do they look like anything we might see near the surface?
Or? Yes, actually. So there is one form of what they're called as nodule epifauna, and that means animals that live on the nodule. And if you can imagine a sort of a branching coral, which you might see in a coral reef, there's something that looks very similar to that known as a stalked crinoid, I believe.
Ooh, okay.
That might be wrong.
So a stalked crinoid, is that like, are crinoids like, I've seen fossils of sea lilies before. They look a little bit like plants, but they're actually living creatures.
Yes, yeah.
Nice. So these nodules, then they have these really important materials, these really important metals in them, but you were also involved in writing a paper that was released earlier this year, which talked about their involvement in dark oxygen. So can you explain to us what dark oxygen is? How is that different from classic oxygen that we've all heard of before?
Normal oxygen, absolutely, yeah. So as part of my research, I was conducting experiments at the seafloor where I used a box to incubate an area of the seafloor and essentially watch how it changes over time. If I give it a food source, are the animals eating that food source? How fast are they doing it? And how fast are they doing other biological processes such as breathing, something that you and I both do. We take in oxygen, nearly, and exhale carbon dioxide, CO2. So when you incubate a sediment and there are animals living and breathing there, you expect the oxygen level to go down. But we found that it went up, which
is strange.
Very unexpected, yes. And it turns out we think that these rocks, these polymetallic nodules, are carrying out a process known as electrolysis, which is where an energy source splits water molecules, so hydrogen and oxygen, into their constituents.
Okay, so these nodules are basically breaking these water molecules into the separate bits of hydrogen and oxygen, and that means there's oxygen down in the abyssal zone.
In the dark.
In the dark. So normally we would think of oxygen as being created by plants and photosynthesize. So using
Yes.
the sun's energy to create this oxygen that we breathe in. But they can't possibly use any of the sun's energy.
Nope.
Because how deep is the sun actually penetrating? What zone is it getting to?
I think the absolute maximum you'd find it is towards the bottom of the twilight zone, approaching 1,000 meters, but that is in the clearest waters ever.
Okay, so sunlight zone, you'd get lots of sunlight. Towards the bottom of this twilight zone, I guess, it's twilight. It's dark, but not pitch black.
Yes.
But then anything below here, you wouldn't expect anything really to make any oxygen, not through photosynthesis.
Not through photosynthesis, yeah.
If we've got oxygen being produced from photosynthesis way at the top, and now potentially this oxygen being generated down at the sea floor, does that open up loads of opportunities for ways of life that we had no idea could exist?
Absolutely. So oxygen is vital to aerobic life. So humans, trees, animals that you see every day require oxygen to live. So as you mentioned, we've previously only thought that oxygen comes from photosynthesis, and this only occurs where there is sufficient sunlight. But if we have got an additional source of oxygen coming from the deep sea, it's just another reason why we need to think carefully about what we do in these environments, and we should think before we impact them, because we might need to preserve this source of oxygen because it may feed into the balance of oxygen on Earth.
Okay, yes, so that basically means we've got this whole new oxygen source we had no idea about, that's been there potentially, the whole time, that we just haven't known about in the history of our understanding of the ocean and the life that lives in it. Because it was only about, 150 years ago that we realized anything could actually live in the deep ocean.
Absolutely.
So when they did the HMS Challenger expedition back in 1872, I think it set off, and they realized...
Impressive memory.
Well, I've talked about it a lot. This whole gallery is about some of that work and its connections to Scotland. So when you come to Dynamic Earth, you can learn about it. But it was about 4.5 years. They discovered thousands of species that they didn't know about at the time. And over the past 150 years, thanks to research like your own, that understanding is just getting better and better.
Yeah.
So, amazing. So, I've asked a few of my questions, and I want to invite you to ask some of your own questions as well. If you've received a Slido link, and then you should be able to pop some questions into there, and I'll see if I can ask some of those questions directly to Alycia. So if there's anything that you have been desperate to ask a deep sea scientist, then this is your opportunity. One question that I suspect we might get asked is, have you seen any really cool deep sea creatures while you've been studying this area?
Absolutely. So you don't see a lot when you take video footage of the seafloor at that depth, because these are areas where there is a low, what we call a low biomass, so a low amount of biological material living there. And to be honest, my work focuses on a group of animals known as macrofauna, and they most of the time are too small for you to see with the naked eye. But sometimes when we're traveling along the seafloor and collecting video footage from an automatic robot that's tethered to the ship, we see fish known as coryphaenoides, which are sort of a deep sea, very smelly cousin of the codfish. And we've also seen things such as giant red prawns, which love the camera. They're very fond of the camera.
How giant are we talking?
Oh, up to sort of 20, 30 centimeters.
Oh, like the size of a school ruler, a prawn the size of a ruler.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Nice, excellent. Now, we've got a question here from Year 6 at Alderley Edge Primary School. How many sharks are there in the ocean? And what part of the world is most populated by sharks? Do you get that many sharks way down in the depths you study?
I actually don't know.
No, we've already stumped Alycia.
Already stumped me. I am so focused on the little animals, I'm not thinking about the big one.
That's true.
Marta would know.
Well, yeah. We can see if we can find out. We've got a question from Mariam, and she asks, why is there sand at the bottom of the ocean?
Oh, another interesting question that I've never thought about the explanation for.
Well, I suppose we must get a lot of sediment at the bottom of the ocean. That's all just little bits of things that have
Yes.
worn away and drifted down
Exactly.
sunk to the
So
bottom.
yeah, the material is washing away from the coastline and being transported through ocean currents down to the depth. And the sediment that you find in the abyss has a very high level of organic material, so material from plankton and animals that have died, and they sink through the water column and settle on the seafloor.
Okay, so yeah, I guess there's a lot of gross stuff, a lot of detritus
Yes,
that's going to
detritus,
come to the
exactly.
bottom.
It's
So
very
it'll be,
gloopy.
yeah, lots of gloopy stuff. And I guess you're going to have lots of creatures at the seafloor that's going to get rid of all that gloopy stuff.
Yes,
Is that right?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, well, on that, I want to take a couple of minutes to have a little look at our activity, which you may have got in front of you in your classrooms. So, I will hopefully be able to help answer a couple more of your questions while we're looking at this, because there's one or two which is about pressure. So that will tie in very nicely to what we're looking at here. So we've got a few different animals that we've printed out that we're going to try and stick into different layers of the deep sea, all the way up to the sunlight zone and in the shallowest area. So, Alycia, if we've got a table down here, which you should be able to see, lovely selection of animals. Can you pick out one of them that you'd find down in the abyss?
Ooh, I'm going to pick up my favorite one, which is a pycnogonid, or otherwise known as a sea spider.
A sea spider, and why is that one of your favorite ones?
So I studied these before I studied what I look at now, and I was looking at whether you could tell between males and females based on the size of their bodies. Okay. Spoiler alert, you can't.
But it's worth doing the research, so we know that.
Exactly.
Excellent, so that would go in the abyss.
Yes, that one would be sitting down on the seafloor.
Lovely. So that's the kind of thing we might see in the abyss. So not getting rid of the stereotype that some of the stuff down at the bottom might be kind of scary looking. Then if we move up to the midnight zone, then there's a few different creatures that can live here because the pressure is still incredibly high, but it's not as high as the very bottom. So what do you reckon we might find down in the midnight zone?
I think I might pick up one that I recognise from a movie that people might have seen.
Yes, so what do we call this one?
This is an anglerfish.
Okay, so it's got its little lure on the top, that little light. Have you ever seen one in real life?
I've not, unfortunately not. That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, but yeah, quite shy, so I hear.
Yeah.
Despite appearances, they are a little bit shy, will hide away.
Yeah.
So we can pop that in the midnight zone, and I'm going to stick this one in as well, which is this is a fangtooth fish, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, so we will pop our fangtooth fish on.
Yeah, there is a
here.
bit of a theme.
Yeah, yeah, a few fish with pretty sharp teeth, then...
Very important for keeping food in them.
Yeah, and they've got lots of adaptations to survive. So, for example, the anglerfish, of course, has its lure, which emits a little bit of light to help them see in this zone where no sunlight is reaching. But if we go a little bit further up, then we can go up to the twilight zone, for example. And actually, this is one animal that we might see in the twilight zone occasionally. It's not going to live there all the time. But penguins are very good at diving to really deep depths in order to get their food. So maybe I'll pop our penguin this way around, as we'll sometimes
having a little dive.
See it go from the sunlight zone into the twilight zone. So the animals will move between zones. And the anglerfish actually can be found in the twilight zone and occasionally in the sunlight zone. There's been records of it going down to depths of about 100 meters. So probably not something you're ever going to see when you go swimming, but you can find them closer to the surface.
On holiday.
Yeah. And finally, what I'm going to stick up here is our kelp. So this is a perfect example of something that needs to photosynthesize. So it needs light in order to survive. So we're not really going to see it any deeper down in the ocean. Now we've got a few other animals, but we don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to leave the rest of the animals to you to stick onto the different layers. And remember, they might not all be found in one layer specifically. You might find them in a couple of different layers. They'll move between, like our penguin and other animals that dive. So we've talked to Alycia a little bit about the deep ocean, and in a moment we are going to join up with another scientist who is very familiar with the sunlight zone and lots of plants that grow up there. Now, before we join Emily from Project Seagrass, who is based down in Wales, I'm going to show you a little video of a diver who is collecting some seagrass seeds. So that will pop up in just a moment. And what this diver is doing is collecting a few different seeds from the seagrass plant, and then these seeds will be taken to the nursery. So in a moment, we should hopefully see, there we go. So here we've got our diver who is clipping some of the seagrass in the shores around the UK. And by doing this work, collecting the seeds, it means that we are then able to plant these seeds and nurture them and make sure that we can grow bigger and bigger seagrass meadows, because you can see how lush it looks there. So now what we'll do is we will connect up with Emily. Emily, hello, can you hear us? Can you see us? Yes. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I can. I can hear you and I can see you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. It's a little bit cold, but the sun's shining, so it's all good.
Yeah, excellent. Now, Emily, I was just saying to everyone that you are the lead at a seagrass nursery down in Wales. So can you tell us a little bit about what that involves?
Yeah, so I'm the project lead for the Seagrass Nursery. And what we're trying to do is plant the seeds that you just saw being picked. So we've got a few here in a little vial. I'm not sure if you can see them. They're really
just
small.
about, yeah.
So they get collected and brought here, and we store them in really nice, safe conditions. And then we plant them into some of these ponds that you can see behind me. So they're filled with salt water. They've got lots of nice light, a good temperature for them to grow in. We plant the seeds and we'll have seedlings just like this. I'm not sure if you can see this little one here that we've got popping up.
Tiny.
Tiny, tiny. And the plan is for them to grow into big, long seagrass plants like
nice.
this. Look how lovely these are.
I like the before and after. So the tiny seeds we could barely see, they've blossomed.
They have.
Amazing. So can you tell us, Emily, why is seagrass so important and why are you doing this work?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. So seagrass, you may have never heard of, but it's the only true plant that lives in the sea. So it spends its whole life underwater in salty conditions, which is quite unusual for plants. But they do a lot of things for us. So you're talking about all the creatures that live in the sea. Seagrass are really important for biodiversity. They create these really big, dense meadows, which are perfect habitats for little young fish to grow up in. There's lots of food, there's lots of protection from predators, and all the coolest species live in seagrass. All the coolest ones that you find in the UK, things like seahorses and sharks and cuttlefish, all live and grow up in seagrass meadows. But they're also really important for protecting our coastlines as well. So they slow down that wave energy so that our coastlines don't get eroded. And they also help to store carbon in their roots. So when they're photosynthesizing and producing oxygen, which we use and the plants and the animals use, they're also storing carbon in their sediments as well. So they do lots of different things for us, and they're really important habitats.
Yeah, so they are home to lots of animals and lots of very different animals as well. If we're going from seahorses to sharks, and they're protecting our coasts, and they're also a massive carbon sink. They're quite a triple threat, I would say. But if they are in salt water and they photosynthesize just like plants on land do, how are they getting pollinated? Because when we think of plants getting pollinated, we'd think usually about insects like bees, but I'm assuming it's not bees that are pollinating the seagrass.
Not quite. So yes, they produce underwater pollen, which is waterproof. And they're tiny little crustaceans, so little crabs and tiny little worms will pollinate the plants for them, just like bumblebees do.
Amazing. So I had no idea that we'd have little crabs that would be basically acting like little bumblebees, just making sure that all these plants are being pollinated. So you can save the bees and save the little crabs as well. Now, I've got a couple more questions for you, Emily, but just a reminder to our viewers that if you've got any questions as well, you can pop them in the Slido and I will try and ask a few of them to Emily too. when it comes to different uses for different plants on land, and there are lots of different plants that we grow to eat. So can we eat the seeds, or can we eat seagrass? Is it play a part of our food system at all?
They do. So in the UK, we have two species of seagrass, which are both belonging to Zostra, which is just the family that they're from. And they produce seeds. So there are historic records of people eating these seeds, just a bit like porridge. But all around the world, there are some plants that produce fruit and people will eat the fruit. And there are some which will produce it and grind it down into a flour as well.
Oh, amazing. So do you have any idea what the flour is used for when it's ground down into a flour?
So sometimes breads or like tortillas as well. They've been used for that in Mexico by indigenous groups, which is really incredible.
Yeah. So maybe we'll make some seagrass tortillas. That'll be the next attempt at using seagrasses in Dynamic Earth. And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering if these plants and these ecosystems are so important, what is it that we can do to help protect seagrass?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So seagrass is really very threatened and it's been quite damaged as well. So we think that in the last century, we've lost up to 90% of our seagrass meadows. So despite the fact that they're really important for all of those things that we talked about, biodiversity and protecting our coastlines and helping with producing oxygen and storing carbon, they're really damaged. So that's down to things like climate change, to pollution and sometimes physical damage. But quite often, we don't know where seagrass is. So we've actually developed, Project Seagrass have developed an app so people can spot where meadows are. We're finding new meadows all the time where seagrass is starting to recover or where we just never knew that a meadow existed. So it's called Seagrass Spotter. And if you're ever out by the coast with an adult, with a guardian or a parent, you can download that app and you can tell us where seagrass meadow is. So you might be the first person to ever discover that meadow, or you might be the first person to ever see it flowering or producing seeds. And that gives us an idea of where our seagrass meadows are, how healthy they are, and what they're doing at different times of the year as well.
Amazing. So yeah, that's Seagrass Spotter. That's worth looking at because we get seagrass all around the coasts of the UK, don't we? They're just everywhere. I mean, not as much seagrass as we'd hope for, but you can find them all over the country, can't you?
You can. So we've got Project Seagrass restoration teams who work across Scotland, across Wales, and across England as well. They're pretty much around all of the coastline, or they definitely used to be.
Amazing. Now, we've got a couple of questions here. So one of our questions is, what well-known animals eat seagrass? That's from Cheriton Fitzpaine Primary School.
Oh, what a good question. So not in the UK, but turtles will eat seagrass. There is a seagrass whose common name is turtle grass because turtles eat it all the time. And also dugongs or manatees, sea cows, the mermaids of the sea will eat seagrass.
Amazing. So they are. We can make food out of them, but then some animals will just have it as it is, delicious. How long does the seagrass grow?
Oh, that's a really good question. And it really varies depending on the species and where you are in the UK. So for UK species, for the Zostra mariners, there are larger species and you can maybe get them up to 1 metre, 2 metres at the absolute maximum.
Wow.
But there is the largest species, which is 5 metres long when it's at its longest.
So are we likely to see the 5 metre long seagrass? I feel like that would be quite easy to spot. I'd be impressed if that was like a new discovery.
That would be very cool. But it's usually around Asia. They usually find them in Japan.
Okay. Now, Castle Hill Primary School have asked, would you recommend your job?
Oh, absolutely. My job is really cool because I get to work with groups like you who maybe never heard about seagrass before. I get to help out with the science and also get to be part of the active restoration as well. So I get to see these tiny little seeds grow up into these incredible plants. And when we set up our nursery, it was one of the first in the UK. So a lot of what we're doing, it's a very, very first thing or first time that it's happened in the UK. So I'd absolutely recommend my job. It's so exciting. There are lots of challenges, but it's a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, and lots of challenges that it must be exciting to help solve. And when we get bigger and bigger meadows growing, that must be really satisfying.
Definitely. So what we've done is we've sent some of the plants that have been grown from our nursery into restoration sites in the field. And we've actually started to go back and see those meadows growing and developing and more creatures coming back. And to be able to see that in action is really an incredible thing.
Amazing. Well, we've actually had someone, Kerry Harrison James, has said we've got Rowan with us, whose family started Project Seagrass. He's the in-house expert who's joined and must be excited to hear about all the success here. We had a lovely question from Graysbrook Primary, which was asking if seagrass changes across the seasons at all.
It does. So just like our plants on land, you'll see that in the autumn, the leaves start to get a little bit brown. So some of the plants that I've got here, I'm not sure if you can see, but some of the leaves are looking a little bit brown. So they'll start to shed their leaves in the autumn, just like the trees do. We'll see in the spring, they'll put out new growth. They'll put out new little plants as well as flowering. And then in the summer, they produce seeds. So just like the plants that we have on the land.
Nice. So lots of different variations in our seagrass. And we've got one more question here from Blackhall Primary School from Holly. How many different types of seagrass are there? Do we know?
What a good question. So around the world, we think there are 72 species of seagrass. But like I said, seagrass research is very new still. So there's still a lot that we don't know. So there might be more species out there that we just haven't found yet. So we think 72 species.
Oh, amazing. So, well, maybe if we've got some keen seagrass spotters, we might find even more, some new species. Now, the final question I think that I will give to you, Emily, is from the British School of Malaga, who have asked, what do you suggest we do to help reduce ocean pollution to protect plants like seagrass and some of the animals that live there?
That's a really good question and a really big question as well. So a lot of what we do with Project Seagrass is that we work with communities and we work with governments. So there's a lot of petitions that you can get involved with, shouting about seagrass and shouting about rivers and shouting about pollution and really making it clear that we want healthy oceans and we want healthy seas. Because the more people who know about it and the more governments that take it under their charge to tackle these things, the better. So shouting about seagrass, shouting about water quality and the threats that they're facing, that the whole ecosystem's facing, is one thing that you can do. And then there are things that you can also do, like getting involved with your local community groups, if there are any kind of river restoration projects or coastal erosion projects where maybe you're looking at where there is erosion or looking at where there are healthy plants and helping to identify those, just like with Seagrass Spotter. Or also things like litter picks as well, because every little bit that we do all builds up and can help.
That's really great advice, and particularly things as simple as litter picks, because any rubbish that doesn't end up being thrown away and stored properly, a lot of it just blows out into our coasts, doesn't it? So that's a really easy way to help protect these habitats that are right on our coast and helping to protect us from the effects of things like climate change. Amazing. So thank you so much, Emily. I think that's all we've got time for our little chat, but it's been amazing to hear from you, to see some real seagrass and to learn about the benefits that seagrass has to biodiversity and protecting our coasts. So thank you very much, Emily. I'll give you a little wave goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
And we've only got about 5 minutes left. So in that last 5 minutes or so, Alycia, we are going to be wrapping up on some of the things that we talked about, but also playing a bit of a game, a bit of a quiz called Science or Fiction. So as a deep sea scientist, I'm sure that you'll be very good at science or fiction.
I hope so.
And you can play along at home as well. We have got some questions where we have come up with some facts about the ocean, except some things are facts, some things are made up, some things are fiction. And so it's as simple as looking at these facts and deciding whether you think they are science or fiction. So what we'll do is we'll get our pictures back up on the screen. There might be one or two left from, oh no, there we go. So here is our first one. In the deep sea, water can get to 0 degrees Celsius without freezing. Do you have any thoughts on that, Alycia?
I would say yes, it can, as I believe the salt content in water reduces its freezing point.
Okay, so let's see if you are right. You are, thankfully. So yeah, you'd think that when we get to 0 degrees Celsius, that the water would freeze and turn into solid ice. But the salt content stops that from happening. And it's also the salt in the seawater that is helping to to generate some of that dark oxygen that we talked about as well.
Yeah, we think that the process of the salt water moving over these rocks is generating the energy for the process, producing the oxygen.
So there's a lot that salt is doing in the water. It's stopping the water from freezing. It's helping generate energy down at the seabed. A lot going on. Excellent. So now our next one is a leatherback sea turtle can dive. Ooh, there's a little bit blocking the the number, so I can't remember what the number is.
1,000 meters.
1,000 meters. 1,000 meters below the surface. So, do we think that leatherback sea turtles can dive 1,000 meters below the surface? That would be all the way to the bottom of the twilight zone. So that's a kilometer. What do you think, Alycia?
I don't know. Yeah. I'm not very good with shallow water species.
Well, I suppose, though, that if a leatherback, the shell's not as hard as a lot of other turtle species.
That's a very good point.
Which makes me think that maybe it would be able to withstand the pressure a little bit. So I'm gonna say that would be science, and it is.
Well done.
So, excellent. So that is science. So coming back to what we said about the animals across the different layers, not just up in the sunlight zone, lots of them, like our penguins and leatherback turtles, will dive down into the twilight zone. And our sperm whale actually will dive even deeper. So there are lots of amazing adaptations these animals have. Okay. So, submarines dig into the seafloor to make the ocean deeper, combating sea level rise. Now, we talked about mining, didn't we?
Yes.
Do we think that this sounds plausible, like the mining of those polymetallic nodules?
I would say, in terms of digging into the seafloor, doesn't sound very plausible. Only because I think you would have to dig quite a lot of the seafloor up to combat sea level rise.
Yeah, I reckon so.
And where would you put all the material?
Well, that's the thing. It's just like you can't really scoop it up and just dump it on land.
Make a new Mount Everest.
Yeah, make an even taller mountain. So yes, okay, you are correct.
It's a shame, though.
It's a shame. It sounds cool, but the ocean being as vast as it is, you'd have a lot of work on your hands to actually make the sea levels go down by doing it that way. Okay, so there are some species of coral that grow in the deep sea without any sunlight. Do you think that you can find some corals in the deep sea, Alycia?
I believe you can, yes. And they are very conveniently named deep sea corals.
Oh, well, that makes me think that maybe we do get corals in the deep sea. So yes, this is science. I think, you had a little bit of existing knowledge that helped you there.
I know.
So have you seen any deep sea corals?
Yes. I've been very fortunate to participate in other people's research and go on different ship expeditions out to sea. And I very luckily participated in one that looked in the North Atlantic at seamounts, which are areas of the seafloor that raise more than 1,000 meters away from the seafloor. And they are biodiversity hotspots, and they often have deep sea corals on them.
Yeah, so do you get a lot of species living in and around the coral reefs as well?
Yeah, it's essentially a deep sea coral reef.
Yeah, amazing. So, the coral that we have in the picture there is actually, if I go back to let you see it, that is Lophelia pertusa. So that's one that you might have heard of before, might be familiar with, yeah? Okay, lovely. So that is science. Now, I think that might be the last one that we do because we only have less than a minute left of our session. So I wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much for joining us as we popped into the ocean. Thank you so much to Alycia for joining us and sharing all of her knowledge, and to Emily as well for joining us and telling us all about the work that she does at the Seagrass Nursery. And make sure you check out being a seagrass spotter as well. So I hope you enjoy all the other sessions that you're taking part in POP24 today. And you'll see me later if you join us for STEM Clubs Hour at 3:30. So hopefully see some of you there and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.